So I got, did you hear, I don't know if you watched it, but I got to play the role of your partisan because I said, well, there's an NDP and Liberal person here, so I will tell you from my experience covering Andrew what he may be thinking right now.
I did notice that, so I found it fun. Yeah. So.
It is.
It was interesting to, like, the NDP, well, clearly John won, the Liberal, well, clearly the Liberal won.
Right. It is, but I was fascinated by these polls about, how close it all seemed. Mm-hmm. So, hello, I'm Richard Zussman, BC's provincial affairs reporter, and I am here in Vancouver for the election campaign to bring you some election coverage. And today, very special guest, I'm here with Green Party leader Andrew Weaver. We will be having the leaders from the three major parties today speaking to Andrew Weaver. Tomorrow will be BC NDP leader John Horgan, and on Thursday, BC Liberal leader Christy Clark. And we want your questions, especially today for Dr. Weaver, to any questions you have about the campaign, about the Green Party platform, about any issues that you're thinking about heading into Election Day, which is 1 week from today. So to start us off, I have a few questions of my own. We've also been sent a number of questions through our social media channels, both during the debate, during our Facebook Live coverage, and also in when we asked for questions, you've sent them. So I will get to those soon. But first to you, Andrew, we're getting close to the end here. What do you think you need to do over the next week to convince voters the Green Party is a legitimate choice for them?
Yeah, well, thanks for the question, Richard. I've spent a lot of time over the last few months traveling around British Columbia trying to get people to have a look at our platform, our policy, and our candidates. I think you're seeing that in the surge of our support across the province, particularly in poll today. We saw the Forum Research poll coming up. We're only a few points behind the Liberals now in British Columbia, surging forward. And as people get to know who I am and what our party stands for, they're coming our way, and it's quite exciting. So for the next week, it seems to me that we just have keeping more of the same, right? So was in Vernon, Kamloops, Kelowna yesterday, Vancouver today. It's a bit of a blur, actually. You sleep when you can and you eat when you can and just keep up for another week.
With all this interaction, you probably have a pretty good sense of how people perceive you. Mm-hmm. What is your sense of how people perceive Andrew Weaver?
Well, I hope, I don't want to second guess anyone, but I hope that they recognize that I got into politics for out of a principle. I've told this story at the rallies across British Columbia that I'm not a career politician, that I stepped up because I could not stand by and see what was going on. I was a University of Victoria prof there, and I promised to give it 100% to try to put people first, because what's going on in this province is we have this money pay for access. It's money's talking. We've got the corporate donors to the BC Liberals and the big labor unions to the BC NDP, and people don't donate vast amounts of money if they're if they don't expect something in return. And our party took the principled approach of only accepting corporate donations from people, and since then our support has surged. So I hope people see me as principled. I hope they see me as trustworthy. I hope they realize that I have integrity and that I don't, I'm not going to say things just to buy people's votes. We're not going to promise to remove the tolls on the Surrey Bridge. Sorry, it's the wrong thing to do. Good public policy is in place now. We're not cynical. So we're there to put good public policy forward.
We're getting to lots of questions. Thank you. We will get to those in 1 minute. Please keep sending your questions for Green Party leader Andrew Weaver. And you mentioned how people may perceive you. What words do you use to describe yourself?
Wow, these are tough questions. Lucky I went first, John and Christy. You now know how do I perceive myself? I work hard. I work very hard, tirelessly so at times. I like to think that I stand up for the underdog. I've done that all my life since I was a little kid. I was the biggest kid in school. And I would try to stand up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. And I feel that that's how I see myself, as somebody who is a voice for people who feel they don't have a voice. And I think that's what it gives me great personal satisfaction to be able to help people and to be able to help people who've been unable to help themselves. And so that hopefully people see that too.
Let's get into the real tough questions, the questions from people that are watching on Facebook Live. So please send them in. Robin Horner says some high school students in Vancouver want to know, what's your favorite color? Is it green?
No, it's red actually. It is red. It's not green. I'm not wearing any green. Green, of course, is a party color. My favorite color is red. It always has been red, and it still is red. So,
And so let's.
That's an honest answer. I hope honesty comes across as well. You know, the kitschy thing would have been to say green, of course. But
so let's get into some policy questions. Yeah. We do have lots of them. Ju wants to know through Facebook, what is your stance and policy on the trophy hunt in BC, on BC grizzlies?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I raised this in the legislature 3 years ago, spoke about it continually through the process. We've been against trophy hunting since day one. In the legislature, I was trying to find clever ways through introduction of legislature to actually get this agenda forward. You know, it's good to see the official opposition has joined me in supporting that now, and it's also you know, good to see even the BC Liberals now are recognizing that. So that's what a Green can do, is you push forward an agenda, others see that the public's on your side, and they start to get behind. You know, I've spoken about this. The BC Greens, we support hunting for food. We do not support trophy hunting, but we also must recognize that you know, rural and urban people sometimes have a different understanding of what trophy hunting is. You know, I think in the urban regions we all agree people going out just to shoot an animal for the heck of it, people do not support that. However, you know, sometimes urban folk or hunters, they see a trophy hunting as finding, say, the majestic elk. And that it is the old moose or the majestic elk. The trophy is the beast, not so much the antlers, but the beast itself. So with the understanding that we have here in the you know, Metro Van, Victoria, you know, trophy hunting it's been in our policy. We don't support it. We support hunting for food only.
Please send in your questions. I'm here on Facebook Live with Green Party leader Andrew Weaver. Send in all the questions you may have for him about the Greens policies, about this election. Anything that you have on your mind, he's here for the next little bit to take all your questions, and I will go back to some of the questions that have been sent in here. Alex Sagert wants to know how you would stop the Kinder Morgan pipeline.
That's a great question, because the BC government have given their nod, the federal government have approved it, but we have a number of cases before the courts. First Nations, Tsleil-Waututh, for example, and others are taking this to court. You know, I believe we have a responsibility as citizens of British Columbia to support First Nations in our province, and I think we could serve as interveners in their case to support them in this regard. We would undertake an investigation as to how the decision was made provincially, because I know full well that as the only MLA who served as an intervener, that no conditions were put forward by the province, no conditions were put forward that were to be met, that suddenly their 6 conditions were met. You know, I know for a fact that the entire oil spill response that was put forward to the National Energy Board predicated 20 hours of sunlight. We needed 20 hours of sunlight. But we calculated this, and in fact, there's not a latitude south of Tuktoyaktuk that has 20 hours of sunlight. So, you know, when I ask a simple question, you know, can we get a more realistic plan that actually recognizes we don't have 20 hours of sunlight here? I was told in response that, well, you've got enough information, NEB, on which to make a decision. So there's a problem. That process was broken, it was flawed. We'd investigate what was going on here provincially, and we'd step in as interveners with the First Nations to ensure that this doesn't go forward. The province would have control on permitting as well, and we'd have obviously very stringent conditions before any permits were given, so stringent that in fact it might be prohibitively so, I would hope, because you know, this is wrong to have diluted bitumen in our coastal waters. We can't clean it up. We need to keep it out of our coastal waters, and we're committed to do just that.
All right, Andrew Weaver is my guest here on Facebook Live. We are taking your questions. Please put them down below the screen, and we'll take as many of those questions as possible. I have a few that have been sent through our social media channels leading up to this. Kevin Wesley asks on Twitter, tuition is increasing at a level where working class students are taking on unaffordable debt. Yeah. How will you help them?
Well, we have a long-term and a short-term plan on that. The long-term plan is to introduce the concept known as basic income. We've got a couple of cases there where we start off with pilot projects, as well as for assisting youth aging out of foster care who, through no fault of their own, ended up in situations where, you know, they couldn't control. So we provide basic income. That it's like a form of negative taxation. The reason why that's important as our goal is that it would eliminate student debt. Our belief is that what we want to do is that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Whether it be our child care policy, our approach to basic income, we believe that we should help people up front and get paid back in the end, as opposed to putting people in debt and then having them struggle. We need to get people out of the poverty trap. So that's our approach in the long term, is to move towards basic income, whereby you have a certain minimum income which would eliminate student debt. But we have to work with the feds, the provinces.
It's costly too, isn't
it? Well,
it?
It is and it isn't. There was a number of studies have been done. particularly in Dauphin, Manitoba, where they eliminated poverty through the introduction of basic income in the 70s. And the costing was actually a savings.
But BC is bigger than Dauphin.
Right, and that's why you start with pilot projects, and you do a longitudinal study to track the cost savings as opposed to the cost. We always think about the cost. We don't think about the savings. If we invest in children, for example, as our plan, historic investment in public education. If we invest in children, $4 billion over 4 years, when they're young, we avoid having to deal with the consequences of not investing them down the road. You know, we're dealing with a fentanyl crisis here, mental health and addiction issues in British Columbia. But we cut over 16 years the services that children had as they went through the school system. We cut those services so that they enter adulthood without perhaps the interventions that could have been there had we not done that. So, but we also have needs-based grants. We also have a whole bunch of other things for students. I encourage you to go and check out the platform.
So we're getting lots of questions in here. Please keep sending them. Andrew will be here at least for another 15 minutes or so, maybe a little bit longer if we can convince him to stay.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to go to Susan Lynn Baldwin's question. How do you see your party helping the old, disabled, and the homeless?
Well, thank you for the question. First off, we have committed in our platform, and it's fully costed. It's not like mysterious costing. We've had economists cost it, a 50% increase in all of the assistance rates over the period of 4 years. We've had these rates not increase for, in the case of, you know, shelter allowance for a decade. So that's the first thing, 50% increase. The second thing is, again, our movement to introduce, starting in pilot projects, the concept of basic income. And in particular in the case of disabilities, we have announced in our platform funding that you'll see it there for enhanced handy dart services as well, which will actually help people who need access to public transportation. Those are three specific things that we've done.
Because you mentioned economists looking at your platform. There are big ideas in this platform that cost a lot of money, and there is costing associated with it, but do you think you've convinced British Columbians that forecasting is correct?
Yes.
That it won't, I just don't know how, with all those big promises, the province can afford to do all of this.
It's a question of priorities. You know, the BC Green believe we should invest in people. The BC Liberals believe that they should invest in their corporate donors. That's why.
How much do they spend on their corporate donors, though?
Let me give you an example. Site C Dam is going to cost British Columbia billions of dollars. We believe that that's reckless. It's being done because we're going to subsidize power, for example, at Woodfibre LNG for 100 jobs to the tune of $440,000 per job per year. So that's a choice, $440,000 subsidy, taxpayer subsidy per year per job. We believe that that money is better off with people. In our cases of our childcare plan, it's actually, I mean, it's costed, but it's also done in a way that's progressive. We recognize that money shouldn't be a barrier to access childcare. But for those who have it, have the money, and if they so choose to access childcare, it would be viewed as a taxable benefit. So we have in place checks and measures. We have had independent economists, like a woman named Lindsay Tedds at University of Victoria Public Administration, come out and say that we should actually be called the Economist Party because of the fact we've picked up on economic principles out there. Moving the taxation system from a regressive form to a progressive one. We're saying that, you know, it's unfair to have punitive MSP premiums that were one size fit all, where we believe it should be progressive. Again, when you look at our costing in MSP, we actually make money by eliminating MSP. And the NDP have not costed their MSP at all. And Mr. Horgan pulled a Kim Campbell moment when he says, oh, we'll worry about that after the election. That's irresponsible. And the BC Liberals have essentially made an aspirational plan. So it's very well costed, it's progressive, and we stand by the costing, and we encourage others to get independent economists to do this. Look, our platform was put together by a suite of experts. These are people who had worked in the civil service. Economists, our chair, Liz Lilly, is a 30-year economist. We've got a diverse array of people, experts who frankly wanted to help out because they saw public policy being putting aside for political ideology in British Columbia, and they wanted to help us get it back in the discourse.
All right, let's get to some more questions here. I have lots. Again, I'm Richard Zussman, CBC's Provincial Affairs reporter, joined by Green Party leader Andrew Weaver. Please send in your questions in the comment section just below the video. I have a few that are adding up here. So let me get to Coral Wagner. If there is a Liberal majority government, how will the Greens try to bring about change in the province?
Well, thank you, Carl, for the question. I think you've seen, first of all, I very much doubt that's going to happen. But, you know, just watch the Greens surging in the polls. We're there to ensure, you know, frankly, neither of those parties should be trusted with the majority. But to the specific case of the Liberals, if you look over the last 4 years, BC Greens, when I ran, we committed to work with whoever formed government. We recognized last election it was not realistic for us to think that we would form government, and we said that our MLAs would actually work with whoever formed government. And I've done just that. Quite a number of bills in various forms have passed. The ones that made the most media attention, of course, are the introduction of sexualized violence and misconduct policies, now a requirement on university campuses, as well as the elimination in British Columbia so that women can no longer be made to wear high heels in the workforce. And I recently had an email from somebody in a workforce in a pub in Victoria who said, thank you so much, because now we're all wearing sneakers, not high heels. So there's two examples. There's more. The Profits of Criminal Notoriety Act, some stuff that you'll never see the light of day that you do behind the scenes to try to support you know, local organizations, and you just want them to get the support. You don't try to make hay over it. There's you know, some of the land title amendments that were done with the housing crisis came out of the BC Green camp. There's a number of these issues, and again, if you sit across and hurl abuse at somebody, if I'm sitting next to you, Richard, and I start yelling at you and insulting you, you're not going to want to work with me. So
well, this Facebook Live would end pretty quick, eh?
Well, it would, yeah. But if we have a discussion and we realize that, you know, no politician actually runs to make the world a worse place than it was when they got elected. So you recognize that everyone gets into this for the right reason. They want to make a positive difference. Sometimes the partisanship gets to people, but you know, ultimately people want to make a difference, and if you can work with them to make a difference, change can happen.
Lots of questions. Please keep sending them. Andrew Johnson's question comes very well out of what we just talked about.
Yeah.
You took some shots there about the Liberals and the NDP governing. You also mentioned the polls.
Yes.
The polls do indicate that your support is going up, but still a far cry from a possibility of forming government. So this is a question you've been asked different ways a number of times over the last week. Can you rule out personally supporting Christy Clark for Premier in a minority situation? And if not, what specific deal breakers would prevent you from supporting her budgets as you have in the past?
Well, first off, it's not correct about supporting the budgets in the past in entirety. I have every vote that I've made in the legislature, I've justified. Unlike the BC NDP, who like sheep vote together on every issue in opposition.
You did vote in favor of their budgets.
Two. I voted against two, and what was remarkable, actually, the BC NDP voted for the last one in 2016. They voted for the Budget Implementation Act because, frankly, when I asked their MLAs, why did you do that? They didn't understand the difference between the Supply Act and the Implementation Act. That's in the weeds,
so
I know.
Let's talk about what you will do.
So
in this situation, back to Andrew's point, in a minority situation, would you rule out supporting Christy Clark?
It's irresponsible at this stage in election to rule anything out. We have deal breakers. Let's suppose there's a minority government situation and the Greens hold the most seat and the Liberals and the NDP are coming to the Greens and saying, we want to work with you to form government. Well, a deal breaker for us would be union and corporate donations, without any question. That's a deal breaker. We got to get this money out of politics. So let's see who's going to be open to that. We have to wait to see what the people of British Columbia say, because ultimately the people of British Columbia are the ones that we serve, BC Greens serve. We don't serve political parties, we serve the people. Let's see how many seats we get. Let's see how many seats the NDP get. Let's see how many seats the Liberal get. Let's take a look at popular opinion. And we're responsive to the people of British Columbia. I'm not going to make decisions based on some partisan people asking me to support one party or another in advance of election. We're here to represent people first, and we want to see what they say before we even entertain this discussion.
But that one big deal breaker.
That is a deal breaker.
Is there any other deal breakers?
Well, there's others that, you know, we believe that, you know, we believe British Columbians deserve a better system in terms of governance. We believe that one of our 6 guiding principles is the participatory democracy. We believe a form of proportional representation down the road is future. If the BC Greens form the majority government, we have committed to introduce proportional representation. We've committed to do that, and we would not have a referendum before, but we would after. So we would commit after the people know what they're voting on. we would ask them, do you want to retain the system, or do you want to move forward with the go back to the previous system?
So there'd be one election with proportional representation, and then after the 2021 election would be a referendum.
Yeah, one or two, and that's a unique position because when we go to Alberta, it was and federally, as soon as parties actually get majority governments, they suddenly forget their promises on proportional representation. We can be trusted on that because it's who we are. We would, of course, extensively engage the citizenship and people in British Columbia to come up with a plan and in a nonpartisan tri-party committee, but we would commit to doing that.
You guys are doing great out there on Facebook. Thank you for all the questions. Andrew's got another event to get to at 1 o'clock. So we have him probably, if my math is right and traffic's okay out there, about another 10 or 15 minutes, I hope. I have lots here. If you do want to ask some more questions, please send them in. Gustav had a question similar to what we were talking about. I do want to get to a lot of the questions, and we can make this one shorter because we have hit on it, but I do want to get to everyone. Would the Greens consider a coalition then with the NDP? We did talk Liberals to form a government if that's what it would take to get rid of the Liberals.
Well, again, we're open to everything. We're open to coalitions, we're open to minorities, we're open to majorities. I've said publicly, if the Greens form a majority, we would seek to ensure that our executive council is representative. We believe that it's healthy to have an executive council that actually has the voices of across British Columbia. We'd look to appoint people from the opposition into our executive council. It's separate from the actual party to ensure that you have ideas there. There's some talent in the room. We want to use that talent. We don't want to suppress that talent, so it bursts out in hyper-partisan ways. So absolutely, we're ready to work with anyone and everyone.
Cher Sue wants to ask you, would you consider increasing the minimum wage to a livable wage according to each municipality in British Columbia?
Well, that's a great idea. So what our plan is to do this. We want to get politics out of the minimum wage idea. So we're in our platform, when you look around the world, we were looking for best practices. The ones that we thought we would get behind, and we've actually embedded in our platform, is what happens in Australia. They have an arm's length fair wage commission, and that fair wage commission annually makes recommendations on minimum wage. There would be nothing to constrain minimum wage in the fair wage commission to be fixed to a jurisdiction. We know the living wage in Victoria is about $21 an hour, and I can only imagine what it is in Vancouver. So there's a good argument for that. But what we need to do first and foremost is get politics out of this, because we also need to recognize, and a fair wage commission would do this, is that we have to engage small business. We have to ensure that small business comes with it together. So there's a role for subsidy, there's a role for small business, and so that's why we would appeal to a fair wage commission, mirrored off what happens in Australia, where they frankly have a minimum wage that's quite a bit higher than even the $15 that's being put forward by the BC NDP. You have to do it slowly over time too.
Okay. Richard Zussman, Provincial Affairs reporter for the CBC, alongside Green Party leader Andrew Weaver. Again, thank you for your questions. We probably have about 10 minutes left with Andrew if you do have any more questions, but I am working through this list that we have here. So thank you again for all of you who have sent in questions. Leslie Eller wants to know, housing is unavailable for the working poor. What is the short-term goal to create housing for everyone? Not everyone had the opportunity to buy their own home.
Yeah, it's a absolutely great question. Thank you for that. I'll be specific on our policy. The details are there at bcgreens.ca/platform. We have a number of things. We've committed to a $750 million a year investment for 4,000 affordable units per year. Number one, we're putting on clamps on the upper end of the market through a 30% foreign buyers tax going across the province that specifically excludes, of course, people who live and work here, who are paying taxes here. We've put in place measures to make graduated the home owner grant as well as the property transfer tax. We've put in a suite of policy measures to clamp down the upper end. But in terms of renters, supply is also an issue. So in terms of renters, what we will do is work with our post-secondary institutions across the province who are desperate to build capacity on campus to get those students who are actually taking up a lot of the lower end in the housing market, taking up those suites, giving us the 0.5% rental rates, get them onto campus where they want to be, But the problem is we've had, again, inability of the province to get behind this because of the fact that it would increase public debt. There's creative and clever ways of doing it where you get the debt off the provincial books, but you have a captive audience, the students who are looking for accommodation, they're willing to pay for it, they have the money to do so, and so that would be our plan to actually, it's a win-win-win. Get students on campus, they have accommodation, frees up the city, puts a downward pressure on rents, increasing capacity, and that's for thousands and thousands of people.
Hillary Dingwall wants to know, why must residents of BC pay for health care through MSP premiums? I added that part.
Yeah.
Why not change it to something like OHIP in Ontario?
Well, that's actually right out of our platform. We will do it exactly the same as Ontario. In Ontario, for those who don't know, they have a line item called healthcare premium, and you basically pay it when you file your income tax. We have CPP, EI, and you'd have healthcare premium. And that amount depends on how much you earn. In Ontario, if you earn just over $200,000 a year, you pay $900 a year on that OHIP. If you're lower income, you pay nothing. That's exactly the system we'll introduce here because it saves bureaucracy. It still brings the revenue in that you require. I mean, if we just eliminated it, we'd have to raise income taxes. And it also recognizes that it's a negotiated benefit that many unions have had costed into their agreements. Doing it the way we're proposing would allow that to remain a costed benefit in their agreements, and it would eliminate a bureaucracy. It would eliminate all the collection agencies. It would eliminate all of that. We actually make money by doing it that way, and we'd have Revenue Canada being the one that actually is collecting it. It's the system to go for. It's been our idea for 3 years now, and thank you for raising it.
All right, so lots more questions coming in. Thank you again. I will get to as many as I can. We're closing in on the end here, but please send them in if you do have any last questions. Brenda Leadley wants to know, what will the Green Party do to support and grow the arts and culture sector in BC? Will you commit to doubling the BC Arts Council budget?
Again, I don't want to make up policy on the fly. It is a very, very good question. I will say that we recognize that culture and arts and culture is part of who we are as British Columbians and Canadians. We recognize the importance of this. We recognize we have a number of people in the film industry running with our team, quite a number actually, a number of people in the gaming industry as well. When I say video game, so we haven't made specific plans within the platform. However, we will commit to ensure that this remains a priority in British Columbia because it's part of who we are, and our whole position is about putting people first, not vested interests, and people are reflected in the community, the culture, and the arts. That is actually expression of who they are. So we'll be there. I don't want to commit off the fly to something that I haven't seen because I think that's irresponsible. But the concept is something we can commit to.
Rhonda Hamilton wants to know, will you stop all fracking in British Columbia?
Well, the means and ways that we'll address this is we propose to increase carbon price and to apply it to all fugitive emissions, which would essentially put a very significant clampdown on the reckless behavior that's going on up in northeastern British Columbia with respect to the deregulation largely of the oil and gas sector. So that in and of itself will actually ensure that you're paying the true cost. It would make there's not a lot of natural gas exploration going on right now because the price is so low and we're a glut. I think that our concern is protecting our water. Our concern is in putting in rigorous standards on that, ensuring that methane emissions are priced, and we think through these regulatory regimes that government can control, we can actually do an awful lot in terms of reducing substantively the amount of horizontal fracking that's been going on. It's very important to recognize that in BC we've had vertical fracking for 50 years or so. The real problem has come so rather than just vertical pipe, is now you go horizontal drilling, and that can expose much greater areas to the fracking, and that is what's led to some of the problems that have been ongoing.
All right, we're still getting lots in here. I know we're running short on time. So to this topic, Robert Alstead wants to know, is BC's climate targets realistic?
Well, I summarize the three parties' plans on climate as this. The BC Liberals have no plan. The BC NDP have yet another plan to develop a plan, to come up with a plan. We have a plan that will actually meet the 40% reduction target by 2030 that we will put in place. We're the only ones that do. The others have either no plan or plan to develop a plan to come up with a plan. And it's so typical with the BC NDP. They kick the can down the road and say, we'll deal with it after we get elected. And the Liberals just look you in the face and saying, we're doing it, when you know full well they're not. So our plan is aggressive. It was put together by a team, again, led by Liz Lilly, who was the former chair of climate policy in the Climate Action Secretariat in the BC government before she retired. We know that we can get there. We can get there with our pricing plan, and so that is realistic. You cannot get there. You simply cannot get there without carbon pricing that starts now, not 3 years from now, it starts today.
So who pays for that carbon pricing? Will people in British Columbia be affected by higher gas prices or any other effect of the carbon price?
Yeah, so when you know what it does is it sends a signal to the market. The price is small on the gas price, 2 cents or 3 cents a year increase. That pales into comparison to the swings you get from the spring to summer driving season. But what's important is it starts to make you invest in the future. We would increase carbon pricing, but at the same time change the mandate of BC Hydro and allow municipalities and others to actually put in place infrastructure for electric vehicles. Right now, you can't actually charge for electricity if you go and fill up your electric car because you'd have to register as a utility.
Short-term would cost people more.
No, I disagree.
Okay.
Because, people always think it costs more. It's only costs more if you so choose to not ignore the signal it sent. So for most people, for me, I drive an electric car, bring on the carbon price, right? It doesn't cost me. For most people, as they transition, you'll see that as well. So it actually assists you make choices.
So we're going to get near the end here, so thank you to everyone who asked questions. A few more just about this idea. We're getting close. The numbers are starting to boil down. We're seeing the polls. Lauren Boothby wants to know, what do you say to those who say voting Green will split the vote and bring the Liberals back in?
Well, first off, the polls are very clear, number one. And number two is, what I say is this. In the last election, 45% of British Columbians did not even bother vote because they were so uninspired by the two mainstream political parties, they stayed at home. It's arrogant to think that a voter would vote another way simply because they voted Greens. To think that Green voters would vote NDP, it's just arrogant. It's just not the case.
But what if the only thing they want is to get rid of the governing party? Then wouldn't they be smarter to invest in the BC NDP, considering they have a greater legacy and more current seats?
Well, you can throw the bad out. I mean, as I said in the leaders' debate, the BC NDP are campaigning on being better than the BC Liberal. Well, better than really bad is just still bad. Look what happened federally. The federal NDP were campaigning on this vote split narrative. We need 33 more seats. We got whatever happened, Trudeau came in on a promise that brought voter turnout out, and he's gone away on his promises. These traditional parties cannot be trusted to actually do what they say they're going to do, because time after time after time they say one thing and do exactly the opposite. We're committed to putting our policies in place, and if we don't, hold me accountable, and I'll tell you here, I'll step aside, because I don't run and say I'm going to do something and then deliberately do the opposite, because that's just wrong. And that's I'm a scientist. You can't do that as a scientist. So again, I would say that, if you want to voting this is bad and you're voting other bad, that's hardly voting for what you want. We encourage people to vote for what they actually want, because you'll never get what you want if you keep voting for what you don't want. And we know that in Oak Bay, Gordon Head last election, when people had that third option, we had the highest voter turnout in the province at 70%. Saanich North on the islands was second highest at 69%, where Adam came within a few 100 votes of winning, and Vicky Huntington was the third highest in Delta, 68%. Independent, yeah.
So I will give the final word to Marin Roy, and it's a two-part question. So the first is, why do you think you can do anything with one seat in the legislature, and let's say it turns into 2 seats?
Well, first off, I've already shown that we've done an awful lot. I don't know how, as I mentioned, how many bills. The fact of the matter is each and every one of our post-secondary institutions in the country, in the province, now is required to have a process and a policy to deal with sexualized misconduct and violence. That didn't happen until I brought it to the legislature. The fact that women don't have to wear high heels in bars and restaurants or any workplace. That's BC Green policy that came in. The fact that you cannot write books about your crimes and profit from criminal notoriety. That's a BC Greens concept. The fact that that both the NDP and the Liberals are talking about MSP now, that's a BC NDP concept, because the BC Liberals, the BC NDP, and the Socreds have all had a chance to eliminate MSPs. We've had them since the 1960s. They talk about doing it, they won't, but now finally we've got 3 parties committing to do it. So, you know, I could go on and on and on about the examples that we got when we're driving the narrative. The reason why the Liberals are talking about the tech sector is because they started to fear the tech sector coming our way. Look, just yesterday, Dave Crisco, the CEO, former founder of Club Penguin, one of BC's most successful tech companies, came out and endorsed our plan, right? So we know that we're having an influence. And can you imagine if we had 25, 30, 40 Greens? We'd be a different province here in the province of British Columbia, one that put people first, not union or corporate donors first.
So here's the follow and the last one. With 1 week left, do you think more seats will come to the Greens?
The question is not if, it's how many. And right now it's anywhere, I mean, again, our trajectory in the polls is up, the others are down. What's important too is leader approval rating is going up, the others are down. In fact, I was quite...
You're the only one that seems to believe the polls, though.
Well, no, I believe the trends. Again, my background is mathematics. Let me tell you, you may not agree one individual poll, but the error in the trend is quite different. The error in the trend is quite different. If we went back to the previous election, the trends were right. NDP was down, Liberals were up. In fact, Forum Research, the one poll that did predict a Liberal outcome, their results came out today, and I think leader approval rating was in the 20s for Horgan and Clark, and it was 40%. Like, I was blown away. I was humbled by that. 40%, and we were 24%. The Liberals were 29%, and the NDP were in the mid-30s. That's exciting. That means it's game on, and we're going up, and the other two are going down. So check out your candidate, check out our platform. You know, contact us. We're going to put people first, and we can promise that.
You've got to run.
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Richard.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Andrew Weaver, Green Party leader, and thank you so much to all of you for your great questions and joining us on Facebook Live.
Thank you. It was great. Yeah.
It's good. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, I think it was good. The questions were really, really
they
interesting.
were good. Yeah. Did you get...